Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. Today we're taking a look at one of the more esoteric, weird orc characters, and calling a character weird by orc standards is definitely saying something, so in this video we will be going over that grot-loving Runtherd and his brand new updated model from 2nd edition, Zodgrod Wortsnagga. Coming in at a relatively cheap 65 points, Zodgrod is an HQ option and has a not terrible, reasonably orky stat line of movement 5, weapon skill 2+, ballistic skill 5+, strength and toughness of 5, 6 wounds, 4 attacks, and a 6-up save. So on the face of it, that seems pretty okay. Aside from the 6-up save, he has a moderate amount of attacks, and strength 5 is certainly not a bad base profile to have. For 65 points, you certainly could do worse than this kind of profile, although of course, as we will find out shortly, it's always the special rules and the abilities that make or break a character. So this stat line may be possibly a bit deceptive on the face of it. Zodgrod is a Runtherd rather than a war boss, so that definitely does impact some of the rules he comes with, although weirdly he doesn't actually come with a lot of the Runtherd specific rules either, so you don't need to include at least one unit of Gretchen infantry if you bring him, and he doesn't have access to things like the Grot Lash to let friendly Gretchen units add 1 to their movement characteristic if they're within 3 inches of him. And as a funny yet weird aside, this is the rule for the Grot Lash in the Warhammer app, and this is the rule from the brand new codex. So make of that what you will. I think the one in the app is actually better, and I would prefer it if that was the rule for it. But, you know, the Warhammer app is going to be janky. It always is. It's always incorrect. But still, the fact that Zodgrod can't do a lot of the things that a Runtherd can is slightly odd, I'm not going to lie. What Zodgrod does have is access to the regular orc rules of Here We Go for those reroll charges, Besnagga for that 6-up invuln, which is actually quite useful on a model that only has a 6-up armor save, and then also granting him that very nice +1 to hit against monsters and vehicles if he is face to face with anything that has an innate -1 to hit on it. And then on top of that, of course, he is a Snakebite, which grants him access to the Snakebite the old ways culture, bringing with it the fantastic pseudo-transhuman physiology rule, which means that strength 6 and strength 7 will only be wounding Zodgrod on 4s instead of 3s, and then the totally useless second part because Zodgrod is, funnily enough, not a squig. So it's kind of an culture for Zodgrod. Making strength 6 and 7 weapons slightly less effective against him is nice, don't get me wrong, but with toughness 5, 6 wounds, and only that 6-up save, he is more often than not going to be relying on Lookout Sir to keep him safe, and a 10-man intercessor squad rapid firing will still put nearly 4 wounds on him if they manage to catch him out in the open. So realistically, he will still die very, very quickly if you don't keep him near the rest of your army for that Lookout Sir protection, and the slight more survivability against strength 6 and strength 7 really isn't going to make that much more of a difference. As an orc, he does benefit from the Warg rule, but as far as I'm aware anyway, based on his stat sheet and his datasheet, he can't actually call one himself even if he is your warlord. He doesn't have the warboss keyword, and that is one of the prerequisites for calling a Warg. So whilst he can advance and charge and get +1 attack, it's definitely not in your best interests to make him your warlord, because let's be honest, you'll be losing out on what is arguably the biggest thing that Orc HQ options bring to the table in either the Warg or the Speed Warg rule. If you do, however, want to make him your warlord for some crazy reason, and again I recommend you don't, but maybe for a narrative game or a grot themed army or something like that, he does come with the Beast Gob warlord trait, which actually isn't terrible for some lists. It grants an aura of 6 inches that lets all squig units get +1 damage on their attacks with things like their Squighog Jaws or their Smasher Squig Jaws or their Squigosaur Jaws. So that is genuinely a very nice buff, and if you are running a pure Snakebites or a pure Besnaggers list and you have a fair amount of Squighog Boys or Smasher Squigs in your army, then being able to grant them an extra point of damage will 100% ramp up their killiness in combat. So I mean, yeah, the trait in itself is not bad by any means, it's a decent warlord trait, but you are effectively going to be giving up an army-wide warg to get it if you take Zodgrod as your warlord. So it's not worth it. It's really not. Just do not make Zodgrod your warlord. You will regret it. He does, of course, come with some of his own bespoke rules, which are unique to him, and these seem to be in replacement of the regular Runtherd rules. And the first of these is his very lore-related super runts. So Zodgrod has always had, fluff-wise, an affinity for the poor little outcasts of Orc society, and as such he can do some funky things for them to buff them and make them feel that little bit more special on the battlefield. So this rule lets you choose a Gretchin core unit, so unfortunately this can't be your Killer Khans or your Grot Cannons, it's pretty much just your Gretchin infantry units, but they then get +1 to hit with their attacks, and they can also perform actions whilst they're shooting without it failing. And this rule is, I mean, it is a buff, I guess, but Gretchin are, let's be honest, pretty terrible at the moment anyway, so giving them +1 to hit with their guns, which are also pretty awful in themselves, being strength 3, no AP, 1 damage guns with a 12-inch range, is kinda neither here nor there. Yeah, they now hit on 3s, but even with that buff, a full score of 30 will kill 1 intercessor, and cost you 150 points for the pleasure of doing so. And then after that, of course, the remaining 4 intercessors from even a minimum squad will probably charge in and do enough damage to cause most of the rest of your squad to run away from morale and attrition. So yeah, this rule is a buff, it's fluffy, I get why they did it, but overall it's a pretty mediocre buff on an absolutely terrible unit. So is it worth bringing Zodgrod for this rule? I would wager 99% of the time, no, not really. His other unique ability though is actually a bit better. Squig Stopper is a rule that lets you target an enemy monster unit within 6 inches at the start of the fight phase, and on a 2+, that unit can't fight until all other eligible units have done so. So if your beast boss on Squigosaur has been charged by, say, Mortarion or some scary Tyrannid Gribbly, you can potentially save his life by forcing that unit to fight last, which does at least give you a chance to try and bring them down before they can swing into your army. And I have to say, for all of his other flaws, this rule alone, obviously heavily dependent on your meta, almost makes Zodgrod worth that 65 point price tag you pay. Because if this saves your warlord, or a load of Squighog boys, or even just protects, you know, a blob of Orc boys from some really damaging enemy monster and lets you try to take them out before they can swing, that's not a bad use of 65 points, even if most of his other abilities and special rules are really quite terrible. In addition to his rules, of course, Zodgrod can attack with his own weapons, and he has a slugger, of course, which is, you know, again, kind of neither here nor there, don't forget to use it if you are ever in combat, but his main weapon is his own unique runt herding stick, which is the Grab Zapper. And this lets you swing with his 4 attacks at strength +2, -3 AP, and 2 damage. So it's actually not that bad. He'll be swinging at strength 7, so combined with his Squig Stopper rule, he can actually do a good bit of work on certain enemy units and try to knock them down a peg or 2 before they can swing. And for reference, on the turn of a warg, he can do on average 4 damage to a toughness 7 monster like a Tyrannid Carnifex. So you could potentially get charged by a Tyrannid monster, force it to fight last, and then along with some support from some boys or Squighog boys, actually kill it before it even gets the chance to swing. He is of course definitely not a melee beatstick character, don't treat him like a kitted out war boss, but he can actually do a deceptive bit of work to enemy monsters, sneaking in a few extra wounds to drop them down a bracket or actually finish them off before they can make their attacks. Following on from that, he doesn't have any unique stratagems to use on him specifically, but he is a beast snagger, so he can take advantage of a couple. Monster Hunters for one, which you could give him to give him +1 to wound, so again, if you were charged by that previously mentioned Carnifex, this would push you to doing just under 6 wounds to it, so arguably being quite a good shout if your boys have taken off a couple of wounds before and you really do want it dead before it then swings back into Zodgrod or your boy squad. And then of course there's the Wortsnagga specific Tough as Squighide, which gives him full transhuman physiology for a phase. It's a great stratagem, for sure, I love it, it's a great stratagem, but let's be honest, it almost seems a bit wasted using 2 CP to keep 65 point Zodgrod alive, when you could instead be saving those 2 CP to use it on something like your Beast Boss or your Squighog boys that are more than likely going to have a greater impact on the overall game. I would say that personally Zodgrod is cool and fluffy, and he does have a really badass model. He's definitely a good shout in sort of a very friendly or a crusade or just a narrative campaign, but his rules really do leave him exceptionally niche in his use. If you are in, say, a campaign where your Wortsnagga orcs are hunting down Tyranid monstrous creatures and that sort of thing, he's definitely worth taking because he would fit in with that campaign theme 100%, and it would be really good fun to use him and use his Squig Stopper rules to kind of show that he's herding and you know, corralling the Tyranid monsters so the rest of the Wortsnaggas can capture them or kill them. But as far as a competitive or even semi-competitive game goes, for an extra 30 points you could get a regular beast boss, which is just so much better as an HQ. It's more customizable, better melee, tougher, more survivable with a better armor save and a better invuln, and of course it gives you access to the absolutely must-have ability of the Warg. So there we go, just a relatively short one today, but that is Zodgrod for you. What do you think of him, and how do you think GW should have done his datasheet and done his rules to make him a bit more viable on the tabletop? Because as much as I love him and his model, he just really isn't worth bringing in 99% of scenarios, at least as far as I can tell from looking at his datasheet. So let me know in the comments below what you think they should have done or added to him to make him worth those 65 points. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me. But until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.